All right, guys, here's a little Total Nutrition Q&A. I gathered up your guys' questions last week. I'm going to kind of answer them, broken up over a few videos because I had a ton of questions. I'd be here for more than an hour. So I'm just going to rip through these. All right, so here we go. What training style did you prefer coming up? More or less, failure sets or less volume and more failure sets, aka Dorian Yates versus Jay Cutler? Honestly, growing up in bodybuilding was very easy because one, there wasn't so much social media where everybody's questioning the training program. We just trained hard and that was it. But I could say generally I stuck with, honestly, relatively the same split, same format training for almost 8-10 years. And I did put almost close to 50 pounds of stage weight doing that same thing, same exercises. And it's actually when I started to get complicated is when results started to diminish. But I would do 3 to 4 exercises per body part, 3 working sets. My last set would be my heaviest set, and it would be to failure, technical failure. So failure when your body can't get as much form. We did do 4 reps, unfortunately, which was fine when I was younger, but as I got older, it really didn't have that much benefit. I did do drop sets as well. I didn't do supersets. I didn't do any of the fancy type of training people do today. And then later on, I moved into more of like a back off set where your first set is actually your heaviest set, trained to technical failure, not including the feeder sets leading up to that. And then 2 back off sets with an RIR of 1 to 2, maintaining perfect form to maximize that mechanical tension in the muscle I'm targeting. That's what I ran with. And it worked really well as I get older. But many people don't understand is as you get older, you do have to tailor your training to how your physique's responding. When I was younger, I could deadlift on a Monday, do like 3 sets of 20 reps of like 405, and then a Tuesday be squatting and I'd feel fine. If I did that now, I wouldn't be able to walk for a week. I don't get sore from training. Still progressing lifts. Does this mean I don't train enough? No, that does not mean that. If you're progressing, you're training hard enough for your body to respond and therefore move forward and progress. Do not change anything. If you are super sore and not progressing, you have a problem, right? It's got nothing to do with training too sore, training not hard enough. You are effectively stimulating the muscle if you are progressing. Simple as that. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what any of the cues are. If you're gaining weight and you're getting stronger, don't change anything. Thoughts on when you mentally check out and prep? I personally have never had that happen before. Even despite some severe preps of ulcerative colitis and legitimately having bloody stools and mucus 17 times a day, I still didn't think about quitting. That's just my stubborn mentality. I get fixed on something and I can't let it go. But as a coach, seeing people do that, you really got to find the source of what's causing that type of mental fatigue, whether it's physical fatigue from prep, whether it's environmental, where at work, it's stressful, or social, relationship. You got to figure out what that is and remove it because your body's just not going to respond in a situation like that. Would you say it's advisable not to take an AI during off-season unless 100% needed? Absolutely. If you don't need to take an AI, do not use it. Aromatase inhibitors do kind of lower the effectiveness of gear. It does. 100% does. Because you need that estrogen. And it's honestly better to change around your compounds to be able to not use any AI or very low AI than use compounds where you feel like you have to use high AI to control the estrogen. It might be a compound issue or a dose issue. There's other things you can use and grow effectively. AI use can cause cardiovascular risk because of altering lipids. And of course, it can cause bone density loss for long terms. That's studied, it's known. So it's best to really use that stuff as little as possible. All right. Again, if you have to be using that stuff so much to control estrogen management, then you need to look at your cycle design. Go to health supps when on cycle. Honestly, it's hard to answer this because people are going to take that as in, oh, I'm using an invisible cloak that's going to protect my health against everything I'm going to put in my body. Not true. But as far as supplements to just to take, I think all the time as a bodybuilder would be NAC, 600 mg twice a day, citrus bergamot, 500 mg twice a day, obviously your vitamin D, your magnesium, your fish oil. What am I missing? I like to take a little bit of zinc, not a lot, under 50 milligrams, so maybe 30 milligrams a day. You can take the zinc, the magnesium at night, also known as ZMA, in that situation. I don't generally go too crazy in regards to health supplements on cycle unless it's warranted, right? So if you know your lab work, get your lab work done regularly, and you're using your cycles, and you're seeing your lab work, you can really address a lot of your diet and your approach with your cycle and your supplementation based on what your lab work says. So I don't like when people just throw a bunch of stuff. They had taken like 15 different health supplements when they're running just testosterone. It's like, do you really need to do that? Probably not. So if you have an issue with lipids, then you take supplements that are more assisted in handling lipids. If your liver enzymes are elevated, then you might want to do supplementation that helps your liver. So that's kind of how you should play it. Don't just take a bunch of stuff just to take a bunch of stuff. I have a headache for 5 days in a row. Definitely concerned. Been at chiro, helped, but came back. Any back tips? So headaches, sometimes chronic headaches from lifting or impact. I know at this point in time you're doing boxing. So when you pull your trap muscles and your muscles are very tight, you can get excruciating headaches. I've had numerous clients, including myself and other people growing up, when they're doing their hack squat and they push their head into the pad and they pull all the muscles in their neck and they have excruciating, bad headaches where they're on Advil all the time, they can't turn their head, then eventually, or you just get it where you have a very tense neck, and even though you can have full range of motion in your neck, you still have chronic headaches, which could be the reason. But again, I'm just going based on this question, considering if it's physical, not necessarily if it's high blood pressure related, lack of caffeine, or lack of sleep, or however other things are going. Is there a product I can add to my water to ensure I'm properly hydrated? Yes, I'm working on one. It's coming out soon. It's called More. It's a flavor. It's a mineral-based water enhancer, calorie-free. Stay tuned. Have you done any content on TRT? I've had friends saying it's life-changing. Well, TRT is life-changing because remember, hormone replacement can be prescribed by law as long as your testosterone is within normal limits. So within normal limits, there's a large range for a male with testosterone. So say if your normal is at 350, that's your normal. But the upper limit, it's 800, all right? So the doctor can legally prescribe testosterone replacement therapy to bring you all up to that level. Of course, you're going to feel wonderful because you're running higher than normal levels. If you're not a bodybuilder and you're just doing that to do it just to feel better, you might want to think twice just because the fact that once you go down that road, you're not coming back because you're going to feel great and you're not going to want to stop. Then when you come off, you're going to feel horrible and you're not going to want to wait the 3 to 6 months it takes to get your normal testosterone back, and therefore you're going to be dependent on it and stay on it. So that's a big decision. How do you structure the diet for a female compared to a female, macros, etc.? There really isn't too much structure change in the female diet besides number of meals per day. You can't really have caloric requirements for a female who's 5'2" and space them over 6 meals a day. They're going to be eating like 2 ounces of meat or something small amount, or if they're really petite rather. So I really like to structure their meals so they at least have some sort of quantity in that meal to keep them satisfied. So usually 5 meals is average, I would say, for a female with my clients. And as far as macros, I'm a little more careful making sure they have enough dietary fat, specifically more so in the off season or general health, just because of menstruation and their own hormones. Women don't do really well on a very, very, very low fat diet for long periods of time. Not a good thing to do. So carbohydrates tend to be something I manipulate more so with females, or if I had to manipulate fats, it'd be cycling fats to be able to get their calories low to lose body fat, if that's the case. How many sets you suggest for back and legs? That's a very difficult question just to broadly answer. I can just give you a broad recommendation, which could be totally off because I don't know how much volume you're doing now or what you're used to. But 3 to 4 exercises, I'd say 4 exercises for back, 3 to 4 working sets, but also depends on how much of those sets you're going to failure, if you're going to failure, or if you're doing drop sets. There's a lot of factors that are at stake there to really make that particular statement. For legs, depending what you're doing, 3 or 4 exercises. Now, is that including hamstrings? Yes. So, for example, leg extensions and warm up, I don't count it. I do a squat, a leg press, a lunge, and maybe a leg curl, and then do the other hamstrings in a separate part of the week. Same sort of thing though for legs. I mean, legs I might do a lot more sets because I do a lot of feeder sets working up to the heaviest weight. But again, probably 3 to 4 working sets per those exercise. Very difficult question to answer in broad terms. Favorite off-season cycle. Keeping things super simple. Test, Deca, Masteron. I think that's a great cycle. Or Test, Deca, D-ball. But a thing about cycle design for a lot of people is age, how people respond. So it's like when you get older, you tend to respond a little differently than you were when you're younger, especially side effects wise, and especially with your appetite. Certain things will rob your appetite as you get older, so you don't tend to take them. Most people I know who are older don't take orals anymore because it just destroys their appetite and they just can't use it. But I think Masteron is a very, very underrated compound that can be utilized in the off-season with good results. Same thing with Primobolan. I know everybody calls Primobolan fake, but I don't think the 80% of Primobolan on the market's fake. I just don't. Maybe 50. But if you know your person and they tested it, then you know it's real. Who do you see as great coaches other than yourself in the bodybuilding industry? Honestly, I truly believe in what defines a good coach. That's the hardest part, right? Because you get guys who deliver results who are just total assholes who don't give a shit about the client or their health or anything, and then just push tons of drugs and do whatever they can to get their athlete to win, to make look them big, look them better. And they also go out and they cherry pick other genetic phenomena from other coaches and try to bribe them to come work with them, and they have all that kind of stuff. So it's really hard to say that. I mean, I know I'm probably leaving out tons of people who are great coaches, but some people who are great, in my opinion, are Johnny D, John Jewett, Justin Randall, Andrew Barry. These are people that I know that have done a good job, and I know that are good people. I know there's probably tons of other ones I'm not mentioning. I'm probably mentioning some people that Andrew Vu is awesome, of course, Aceto. So it's really hard I know I'm missing other people. So that's a real tough question to ask. Are you taking any new clients? No, unfortunately, I'm not. Top 5 health supplements. I mentioned this a little bit earlier. I would say NAC, fish oil, magnesium. I'm going to group magnesium and zinc together. Citrus bergamot, and then red yeast rice if you need them. But I mean, when it comes to like, ubiquinol, I mean, I can make a whole list. What I said earlier about like using your health supplements to adjust to what your blood work is or your needs or your predisposition in your family is how you do that. How did you get into bodybuilding? I know it's a cliche question, but how was it initiated? It was actually initiated because of motocross. First of all, I always liked superheroes. I always was attracted to usually the athletic more of the superhero, like Wolverine versus the Hulk. And when I was racing motocross, I had a trainer that trained me with weights. And when I trained with weights, my body responded and it looked like a muscular physique. I had lines and definition and striations, and I thought that was cool. And then I picked up bodybuilding magazines to learn more about that. And then I always wanted to bodybuild, but you can't bodybuild and race motocross. This doesn't work. So I always wanted to do it. So the second I quit motocross, I went right into bodybuilding. Yay or nay on prophylactic pharmaceuticals such as metformin and telmisartan. If there is a need for them in your protocol, like with high blood pressure or insulin resistance, then I do believe seeing a physician and using those can be greatly beneficial for long-term health and to combat a lot of the issues associated with gear use, 100%. Ever worked with someone who's iron deficient but not anemic? I have been in situations like that, and they usually just had an absorption issue. They had to get iron infusions, or they do iron supplementation with the doctor, which resolved the issue, but they were never able to solve the issue or what it was caused. In a cutting diet, can you be loose with carbs? Oh, loose with carbs and fats as long as you hit your protein and calorie marks. Some people can, but the bottom line is when you're dieting, you diet, right? So if you have your calorie marks and this is your calories and you think that you could constantly bend your fats and your carbs around, in theory you can, because if you're truly doing it right, because the amount of calories in the day it ends matters the most, but you might vary in days of energy. You might vary in days in hunger, because obviously if you have a day that's higher fat, lower carb, you're not gonna be as hungry. If you have a day that's higher carb, lower fat, you're gonna be hungry. I like to be more strict and keep things a little more consistent. What is the best part about coaching a wide demographic? Seeing how many different people respond to different things. You might work with 5 people and you do the X, Y, and Z, and more than 80% of them respond great. a couple percent don't. Then you get one person that comes along and you implement a similar strategy and nothing works. And then you're like, what? And then eventually it takes a while to figure it out, then you figure it out. That's the most interesting part, is seeing how different things are. A lot of people paint nutrition as a black and white concept or nutritional strategies that work for everybody, but that's not true. People ask me, hey, what's your philosophy? Well, philosophy is to find out what works, whatever that it's going to be. I don't have anything stuck where like, I'm a keto guy, I'm a carb guy, I'm this guy. I just try to do what works for that individual. 150 milligrams of tren made me very sick, flu symptoms to where I couldn't train and I feel like that's rare. You'd be surprised. I don't know if the tren itself was making you sick or if it was the preservatives in there or a high ethyl alcohol, because there are a large number of people that they can't use certain esters, or they can't use certain brands or how it was made because the injection site gets really swollen and they get flu-like symptoms and they get fever and they feel sick, and then 4 or 5 days after they feel better and they do another shot, then it happens all over again. I would suggest trying a different brand and then making some adjustments to figure that out. Is it wrong to ask your coach for sourcing in regards to peds? For some say no, some say yes. Is it wrong? I mean, I think if a coach is selling drugs, I think that's a terrible idea. I think it's terrible. It's a bad judgment call, that's for sure. But as far as sourcing and pointing in the right direction, I mean, that's up to the coach. I don't think it's wrong. I don't think it's right. It's whatever. Is it wrong to ask? No. Worst you can do is ask, but don't expect it. How do you adjust training when coming on T or T? You adjust training when you're coming on T or T when your body tells you to adjust training. So constant auto-regulation that you would always use anyway during a cycle, right? So you have enhanced recovery, you're training really hard, you come off, and then you're going to have at least 21 days to have some sort of enhanced recovery until it's all out of your system. Then you notice your recovery is hindered. Then you might want to start backing off your intensity or your volume. I personally like to back off the volume but maintain the intensity. So I might have to remove 2 working sets, or even sometimes scratch a whole exercise if I'm really sore and recovering slowly. That way I can stay on top of recovery so I'm not sore for 6 days. What's the rate of which glycogen is stored? It's an impossible question to answer because there's so many factors that affect glycogen storage. Genetics, depletion, what type of carbs you're consuming, if you're consuming carbs with fats, the quantity of carbs, the duration in which, are you expecting to replenish your glycogen in 8 hours, 12 hours, 16, 24 hours, etc. I'm having a hard time developing mass on my outer sleep of your quad. Any advice? It's genetic. Sorry, it's genetic. Outer sleep is genetic. You can't isolate your vastus medialis and vastus lateralis like you can isolate your upper and mid chest. Are there potential foot positions where you can kind of feel it more in certain areas of your quads? Sure. Is that really going to equate to massive isolation of the area? Absolutely not. So you really just want to choose exercises that you really feel a lot of connection with your upper quad. Whatever movement that is, whatever position you put yourself in, that's what you should do. Explain the importance of knowing your own central nervous system threshold from training. Yeah, so if you're a heavy lifter and you're doing heavy compound movements like squats, deadlifts, barbell rows, bench press, and you're training insanely heavy and you're constantly feeling dead like you're hit by a truck the next day, you're not overtraining your muscles per se, you're overtraining your central nervous system, where your central nervous system can't keep up with those heavy motions that tax you so bad, where you can't return to training to effectively train another body part the next day. So you might need to make adjustments in movements where your barbell row becomes your chest supported row, or maybe your bench press becomes dumbbell press or machine press, where your hack squat or your back squat becomes a hack squat, your full deadlift becomes dumbbell RDL, something that might be similar but less taxing, where you can mitigate that fatigue but still stimulate the muscles, or cycle your movements, right? You might not be able to squat really heavy and and deadlift really heavy in the same week. You might need to do them alternate weeks. So that's very important, because if you're not staying on top of that, you're really going to have hindered progress. Super bad. Any tips on starting to train, coach people in person? Any tips on starting to train or coach people in person for the first time? Tips is just to get into it and don't get overwhelmed. Start small. Start with 3 or 4 people and learn. Be perceptive. have an open mind. Don't stick to one particular way of doing something. Constantly learn, because it's an ever evolving practice. What I know now, coaching from a year ago, is different. 2 years, 5 years ago, 8 years ago is drastically different from what I do now. And then eventually you'll be able to have more clients, be more efficient at what you do, get them to have better results. What qualities do you look for in a client to ensure successful client-coach relationship? That's a tough one. I always say communication is the most important part, but yet still 30 or 40% of people don't communicate properly. They just don't. Or they wait until something bothers them, then they tell, or they wait until something bothers them over long periods of time, then they tell you. Then they're like, oh, well, I've been feeling this for a while. I'm like, well, that's on you. You got to be able to effectively communicate anything that's a problem or something you don't agree with, because if you don't agree with it, even if it's the right thing to do and you don't think it is, then it's not going to work as well as it was if we did something that was moderately good that you thought was great, because you're going to follow it to a higher level in execution than you would if you didn't believe in what I was telling you to do. So communication is paramount. It really is. For most, there's some clients that just listen like a military, like a soldier, and they just do it. And then they don't even think. They don't overthink. They just follow the directions and implement it. And that's a different situation, different type of person. How do you taper cardio off if you've been doing 30, 60 minutes days per week? That's easy. Just reduce it. I mean, the question comes down to, do you want to continue doing cardio? If you love cardio, then you might want to do 25 minutes, 6 days a week. If you don't love cardio and you hate it, then maybe bring it right down to like 4 minutes at 30-minute sessions a week, or 5 25-minute sessions. Just a small decrease. It doesn't make a huge difference in that regard. You definitely don't want to go to 0, but I would always keep 4 in. Ideal post-workout shake. Ideal post-workout shake for me is obviously a faster digesting protein powder like whey isolate or an egg isolate or something like that. And then you have fast digesting carbohydrates. Could be cream of wheat, cream of rice, rice and grinds, grits. And then I always like to have a fruit. I like to implement the fructose and some sort of micronutrient content in that meal. And then I like to do a baby bit of fat. Some people are like, oh, you can't do fat. You're going to get insulin resistance or you're going to interfere with absorption. 5 grams of fat is not the end of the world in your post-workout shake. Not to mention it's going to kind of avoid that huge spike and crash, which I necessarily don't want to feel sleepy an hour and a half after I train when I'm trying to go to work. Do you find the eccentric part of the rep more important than the concentric or vice versa? Of course, eccentric is the most important part of the motion in regards to muscle growth and change. Eccentric is also when injury occurs in sports. It's not as much the explosion that does it, it's the landing that does the tearing or issue. But concentric is the most important part. Doesn't mean you neglect the concentric, just means it needs to be a little more focused on the negative eccentric. Ever done a bulk with a diabetic? How to push food to keep them stable? Yes, I have many times actually. I honestly implement more fats as calories because it's all about, especially if they're type 1, it's all about keeping good glycemic control. It becomes a little difficult. So usually Lantus I try to get Lantus pretty constant with a pretty high protein diet, moderate fat. And then carbs are kind of evenly distributed through the day. And then in training days, carbs would be focused around training and would be covered with Humalog, fast-acting insulin, and matching your carb insulin response. You know, the 10 to 15 grams of carbs, 10 to 15 grams of 10 to 15 grams of carbs per unit of insulin. That varies from diabetic to diabetic and what carb you choose, but you get what I'm trying to say. Protein intake of 2 to 3 grams per kilogram of lean body mass or 3 to 4 kilograms for gaining muscle. Either one, 2 to 3 grams per kilogram of lean body mass works is if you have enough calories, because it comes down to calories. Gaining muscle has more to do with your total calorie intake than it does your protein intake. Most people are eating plenty of protein to grow. Most are. It's the total calories that become more of the issue in that realm of gaining muscle. How to liver detox. Stop taking the drugs that are causing liver harm. That's really it, honestly. Your liver is good at detoxifying itself. Yeah, sure, milk thistle, NAC, glutathione, all that stuff has helped to regenerate the liver cells. And of course, TUDCA, some research. But at the end of the day, your liver does a good job on its own. I'm just not a huge fan of these liver detox situations. I don't see the research on it. I don't see the studies. A lot of it's anecdotal. But as long as my liver enzymes are coming down, I do think NAC's really good. I really do. I do think, eating a good balanced diet without crap, making sure you're not having a fatty liver going on or anything like that. And of course, removing all the drugs that are affecting your liver is plenty. I've seen situations where I've used myth thistle and my liver enzymes never changed. Then I use NAC, my liver enzymes are normal. So, and some people report the difference, but I wouldn't overemphasize that besides using blood work to see where you're at. Get your AST, your LT, your alk phos, and your GGT all tested. Your favorite ab exercise, ab wheel, hands down. Ab wheel, favorite ab exercise. Favorite core exercise, probably dead bugs and McGill curl-ups. High protein, 10 to 12 ounces was overkill. I've gotten better results. Yes, 10 to 12 ounces is super overkill. Especially if somebody's like 200 pounds. It's so overkill. A lot of protein is overkill. A lot of it is it's anecdotal stuff. Take a bunch of drugs, eat a bunch of protein, see what sticks to the wall. It looks great. Protein has a higher thermal effective food, so I can keep carbs lower. And then maybe I could get in a situation where you're always having enough protein all the time to grow muscle and maximize muscle and not gain fat would be the theory with a bunch of drugs. I'm not into that. I don't condone that. Is GH required to create a pro level classic bodybuilding physique? No. Genetics are. Is GH play a role and help? Yes, of course it does, but it's not required. Where did you learn to pose and what did you learn? I learned to pose from many people, but the person who made the biggest impact was Kenny Wallach. And this is before he was the Kenny Wallach. We're going way back. We're going back to 2009, 2010, 2009, where we're all a tight group down at Powerhouse, New Haven. At the time, it was actually Gold's. Now it's now it's Powerhouse. But the Montanari brothers, those were the days. I'll go back to those in 2 seconds. For a person cutting from 234, not in shape, what you start the calories at? Hey man, I don't know. The bottom, I don't know your height. I don't know your activity level. I don't know what you've been eating. I don't know your genetics or your pictures. These are all things you need to figure that out. But the bottom line is you can use any app to figure out your calories roughly based on plugging all your information to figure out your calories. And what those calories are is what you should start with. And then you go 5 days consistently and you see what the scale says, see how you feel, how you perform, and then make changes from that calorie amount moving forward. And then you keep doing that and progressing and progressing and progressing. That's not enough information to be able to answer that question. Can no longer drink pasteurized egg whites. Is that common in bodybuilding? Yes, super common. I'm going to say 40% of people who drink egg whites eventually end up having issues and having diarrhea. It's only a matter of time before they catch the bacteria train where bacteria grows too much in the bottle and they drink it and they have diarrhea. All you need for real rapid bacteria growth is the right temperature, water, and protein. And what is egg whites? You have all that. Now, if that carton of egg whites was exposed to a warmer temperature in transit, you opened it, you left it on the counter, you poured it, put it in the fridge, and the fridge wasn't proper temperature, and you wait 24 hours, you drink it, you could have diarrhea. So people who do drink it, I always recommend getting the smaller cartons because you're opening it, finishing the carton, throwing it away, you're done, and you're not keeping it on. I don't think it's necessary. I think you should cook eggs. If not, avoid doing that situation. Do my first HGH run starting off low and going to work up to 4 IUs a day. Any tips for the first timer? Get ready for the side effects, pal. Get ready for fatigue, more pumps, fat, chubby hands, and painful wrists in the middle of the night, and numbness in your thumbs. Get ready. That's pretty much about it as far as tips-wise. And a lot of people, GH, you don't feel wonderful on it. I'll tell you that. I'm a lot heavier now from when I died before. I don't know where to start, carbs or keto. That you start where if you have no structured plan and you're eating like a total asshole and you're eating whatever, pancakes and whatever, then you need to get a diet app or go on and get an app and plug in your information, find your calories, do a balanced macro profile, and then divide those macros into 4 meals, and then pick the foods you want to make up those meals and those macros, follow it. And then once you're there for 5 days, see how your weight does and then make adjustment from there. Don't go right to keto though. That's not sustainable. Nobody's gonna follow keto forever. Not a question, but a topic. Healthy weight gain. I don't know what that question means. Healthy weight gain. In retrospect to what? You're too light, you're too small, you need to gain weight. What's a healthy rate of gain? You have to expand on that. Favorite era to watch? I miss my old era. I mean, bodybuilding when I was a fan. Bodybuilding was the most fun when I was a fan. And I would love to go to the trade shows and see everybody. And so we're going back to 2003, 2004, 2005, around that time. 2004, 2005 was the start. Do you think it's safe to do bodybuilding natural long-term or no? Natural bodybuilding? Yeah. I mean, it's a hell of a lot safer than being a traditional American and being overweight and having metabolic syndrome, that's for sure. Salmon with or without skin, does it make a difference from tracking fat macro? I honestly don't even know the answer to that. I always remove the skin. I'm not exactly sure. You're gonna have to look that up. That's a good question for Google. Do deadlifts have a place in bodybuilding? Yes. How a lot of people do deadlifts in bodybuilding on the amateur level and beginning level? No. Watch the guys deadlift who are top pros. Watch how they do it. Follow suit what they do. See a lot of people bouncing unnecessary weight off the floor, just moving weight and not exactly working the muscles. They're just working the movement. Two best tricep exercises, do you think? I love double pulley cable press down, V-bar, and I love lying prone dumbbell tricep extensions with a neutral grip or an overhead tricep. Those are my favorite. Last question until the next one. Believe in a logbook and progressing weights and reps per week? Yes, I really do. If you're really into this, you're very serious, yes. Just make sure you don't start chasing numbers and chasing numbers only. I'll do this last question. There's so many. Supplements you use for acid reflux or low stomach acid? Low stomach acid? Well, stomach acid reflux, mineral water, believe it or not, helps that because the bicarbonate added to the water, you drink 3 liters of bicarbonate, 3 liters of mineral water like Evian for 3 days, your acid reflux will calm down. But most importantly, remove all the trigger foods that are causing the acid reflux. Your pepper, your chipotle seasoning, your barbecue sauce, your hot sauce, too much coffee, chewing tobacco, garlic, onion, all things of that nature. You remove those because those are the problems. Or you cut them in half, implement the mineral water, and then go that way. The other thing people do is using apple cider vinegar with a mother, 1 tablespoon, 1 to 3 times per day, diluted in 16 ounces of a diet beverage like Diet Snapple. That can help as well. All right. All right, guys, I answered a lot of questions. I don't know if this video is going to load. It's so long, but I'll answer the rest of the questions